No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about something that I've been meaning to talk to for a while, and then you wrote our Monday blog post on LinkedIn about it, and the feedback that we got from people who read it said basically, we want more of this. Like we want you to go more into depth on this topic, and we agree. And so we're going to be talking about talent assessment today, and basically how a lot of leaders aren't as good at it as they need to be.
Yes, I felt the need to kind of talk a little bit about this because, and again, this is not one of those things where it's like I want to roast leaders that are not great at it. It's just one of the things that we have to hold ourselves accountable, look in the mirror, and truly understand what it actually looks like to have good talent assessment, and what are we doing for longer term goals around building teams that not only can become high performing teams, but maintain high performance, but then also kind of build in the ability to work well together to build more leaders. So like there's a lot to unpack there. But I think sometimes, and we've talked so many times about the transition from like individual contributor to then leader, and going to new teams and new cultures and new environments. But this is one of those things that I still see as a really sticking point because a lot of organizations continue to have recruiters and other people that are a part of the talent assessment pipeline, especially when it comes to like hiring people. And so like by the time it already gets to a leader, there's already been some elements of filters applied to even who you're talking to. So I thought it was, just a good time to kind of talk about this and bring it back up to the front.
I think when I first became aware of the deficits and the gaps that existed in talent assessment was when I would say maybe 10 or 12 years ago, there became kind of like the first kind of push toward removing unconscious and inherent bias when it comes to hiring people. And we talk about not having unconscious bias when it comes to the anything that would get you in legal trouble as like kind of like the basic cost of admission, any like protected kind of classes that you can't really you can't discriminate against. And then there's the unconscious bias that comes with I want to hire a friend of mine. Well, are they really good for the job? Like that. Those are the easy ones. The reason why I think this bleeds into talent assessment is because a lot of leaders are insulated into whatever bubble they have, whatever bubble of people they have. And if I have 10 people reporting to me and I'm part of a broader organization, I probably have several peers around the organization and they have 10 people reporting up to them. There are definitely situations out there where because of our human nature to sort of grade on a bell curve, the person who I would say is my top performer, who I would give all the accolades to and the largest annual bonus and raise and the most likely to get promoted, maybe that person wouldn't even cut it on another team of 10 people that might be 1,000 miles away in another part of the organization. And so there's just the level setting isn't done intentionally in a lot of organizations, which leaves individual leaders to judge their people and rate their people and assess their people and assess the talent they have available to them based solely on what they're exposed to. It's no different than it's basically it's going through life with one eye open only instead of being able to take a macro view of things. And it's not easy to do unless you are incredibly intentional about doing it.
I like the part that you talked about, like this has been a lot more top of mind as we talked about things like unconscious bias and things like that. And I think, this may be a great topic for us to go deeper into. And I did another article about this the other day, but like where I said like, can unconscious bias be a good thing? And the whole point of that was to say like, of course we have bias. We all have bias.
Yeah.
and we want to paint this bias as like kind of like mostly or all negative, and then we also want to like say like, well, people's unconscious bias, and I'm like, no, like that's not unconscious, that's very conscious. Sometimes it's explicit bias. You know what I have explicit bias about? People that are nice. People that have positivity about them, people that are curious and they're welcoming, and they're not combative, and like that's I have a very explicit bias for those types of people that I want in my life.
That's a huge get out of jail free card for the lack of ability to do a job in the short term.
Right. So like I'll give you the extreme. You walk into an interview with me and I say, "Hey, I'm Lorenzo. Nice to meet you," and you say, "Shut up, jerk face." I'm gonna say, okay, let's have a conversation. Yeah. But my explicit bias is going to be very much like, I don't know that you're going to be a good fit here, right? Like, right. I'm telling you. So we tend to get caught so much in these spaces, especially when it comes to talent assessment, that we talk about like being conscious of our bias and our unconscious bias. And the whole point of this was like, look, let's be okay with the fact that we have bias and that we need to leverage our unconscious bias and our explicit bias and our conscious bias to make sure that we are finding people that not only align with us on a value standpoint, but that bring something new and different to the team. Like we have to be constantly looking for that if we're making great choices when it comes to talent assessment and talent decisions to be able to build the best team possible.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll give a real personal story about this. I was a very new leader in a role where I had to kind of do a first round of screenings. And I was amongst a team of people who were doing screenings, hiring for a brand new store. And a lot of the people that were coming in to interview, they didn't look the part in terms of just how they were dressed. Like they looked like they didn't care about what they looked like when they came into the interview. And how I both grew up and was raised and went through interview processes and had been in other areas where I had been part of hiring and screening, all of that history said to me, wait a minute, this person that is in here isn't a fit for the job because they just didn't, like, even if they don't know how to do the job, at least like act as if, right? Like try to look the part. And I had to have somebody pull me aside and say, a lot of the people who are interviewing for these roles, they have never been brought up in a way that says this is what you do for an interview. You're supposed to just show up. So if they don't look like they're supposed to, be in a job interview right now, I'm not talking about suit and tie. I mean, like they rolled out of bed and into the interview. I had somebody show up wearing pajama pants and UGG boots to a job interview, and I had to really check my own kind of like the history of what I brought to that process to say, is the reason this person is dressed like this is because they don't care? Or is it because they truly have no idea whether or not, or how they're supposed to be when it comes to a job interview? And so that's kind of like the high level of it. But it goes all the way down to the little things that you don't even think are formed by your history. And every single opinion you bring into talent assessment of people that you're hiring or people who are part of your team already, every single one of those opinions you have that leads you to judge both positively and negatively an action or a result or a behavior that a person does is formed by your history of what you've been through when it comes to that. And I'm not saying that there's no way to get rid of it, but you need to be aware of it so that you can make sure that the decisions you're making are in spirit of what is right for the organization as a whole and the values that the organization espouses, and in fairness, and making sure that the right people get promoted and kind of have opportunities given to them regardless of what you might bring to it. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is have you ever been kind of called out on something with regard to talent assessment where you thought about something a certain way based on just your history and someone had to bring something else to your mind that led you to think things differently about how you rated and judged and assessed talent? So I want to ask you that, but first I want to get a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, how has your assessment of talent been shaped by someone else kind of bringing something to your attention that was really just kind of like a light bulb or eye-opening moment that really shifted the way you assess talent?
I think back early as like an assistant sales manager, and my kind of my overall approach to being successful as an individual contributor in sales and things like that was always kind of this, kind of big persona, loud, kind of very robust in regards to just like, being in a room, being a loud voice, rah-rah kind of excitement type of thing. And that's kind of how I've always felt around. And now I've matured to feel understanding like what energy is and like, are you bringing positive energy, and you don't have to be so loud and crazy to like get a bunch of attention. You can just bring energy into a room. But that's how I perceived like what good and great salespeople were. Because a lot of those that were around me that I saw had that similarity in just their personal demeanor and who they were. And I remember being with some peers of mine, some assistant managers, talking about an opportunity for somebody from a promotion from part-time to full-time. And, my list of people, I was like, well, it should be this person, this person, this person. Like, they kind of have this, they've got great results. They have this great attitude, blah, blah, blah. And one of my peers was like, well, are they the top 3 in performance? Like 1, 2, 3? And I was like, well, I mean, probably they've got to be like, like they lead everything. They're great, right? The whole thing. And I'm like, I don't like, who else would be beating them in performance? And they were just like, well, like, why do you think it would only be those 3 or whatever? And I was like, well, they're highly engaged. They're always speaking up in the meetings. They're all like, it's just all of this kind of rah-rah proactive type of thing. And then one of the assistant manager was like, well, what if I told you that there's somebody else on the team that outperforms all 3 of them? And I was like, that's impossible. That's not even possible. How dare you, right? How dare you challenge me on something like this? And then we pulled up the data, and sure enough, I was wrong and they were right. But it was a great lesson because we had somebody on the team that was outperforming when you broke it down to hours of productivity. I was looking at big ticket. I was looking at, who's doing a lot of the heavy work here. But when you look at somebody's productivity, the way that we did it, this employee was actually outperforming them. This employee was also not rah-rah. They were not big voice and boisterous. They were not always running to me with their receipts and all their data and everything like that. So that for me was a real lesson in understanding of like, just because other people around you maybe share some similarities in approach or demeanor doesn't necessarily equal that they are the most productive person on the team. And quite often, as I've learned in life now, it's quite often many times the opposite. It's those kind of with their head down, doing their own thing, committed to the work, not out there running around trying to show off what they've done, but just continuing to be great day in and day out.
Yeah, this is this is Moneyball, right? He gets on base, right? This is Moneyball. This is we don't look at the number of home runs. We look at the he gets on base, right? That was the whole premise of that, is that the number of people who aren't necessarily, they don't show up as superstars. They're not the ones being highlighted on ESPN Sports, but they quietly and behind the scenes are the ones that bring the wins. That is a real big thing when it comes to talent assessment. And I'll say, I think the single biggest thing that I've seen when it comes to leaders who do well at talent assessment, what they have in common is a serious commitment, a planned and scheduled and executed commitment to be communicating with their peers in other areas of the organization, people they would not normally talk to on a daily basis about talent, because they're constantly trying to level set whether their opinions of their own people fall in line with their peers' opinions of their people. And it's almost like it's broadening the spectrum of people you're compared against. It's in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. This is what it is. If my best performer isn't very good, but they're the best that I have, I might think this is what's possible. But if more than that is possible, then you need to be aware of that as a leader, because you might be either not setting the bar high enough for what your people are capable of, or what you should be demanding, or on the flip side, your lowest performer might be one of the top performers in the organization if you happen to have a really strong, high-performing team. And maybe that person is not getting the accolades they deserve because they're bringing up the rear of your small 10-person team, but they could be among the top 10% performing in the entire organization because you happen to run a really great team. So again, the larger picture you can paint about what talent looks like in your organization, the more likely you are to be able to come up with truly objective criteria for what makes a person talented and good at their role and deserving of more, more opportunity versus people who need work. And so constantly be just checking that. Don't get into the trap of just believing that because you're a good judge of your own people, that you're a good judge of all the people.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.